As she walked through the garden of the mansion, a maid found the Millionaire'S unlimited credit card among the bushes. Everyone was shocked by what she decided to do. Sarah sighed as she pushed the cleaning cart through the wide marble hallways of the Turner mansion. The morning sun filtered through the huge windows, illuminating the luxurious artwork and designer furniture that adorned the residence. At 28 years old, Sarah had already been working as a housekeeper for the Turner family, one of the richest and most influential in the country, for 5 years. As she headed towards the gardens to begin her daily tasks, Sarah couldn't help but think of her 6-month-old son, Matthew, whom she had left in her mother's care. The image of her baby smiling gave her strength to face another long day of work. The garden of the Turner mansion was a true earthly paradise, with ornamental fountains, marble sculptures, and an impressive variety of exotic flowers. Sarah began to collect fallen leaves and prune the bushes carefully, as she always did. It was then that something caught her attention. Among the rose bushes, a dark object contrasted with the green foliage. Intrigued, Sarah approached and, pushing aside the branches, discovered a fine leather wallet, black and shiny. With her heart racing, Sarah looked around to make sure no one was watching her. Then, with trembling hands, she took the wallet and opened it. Her eyes widened as she saw the contents: a golden credit card, a wad of high-denomination bills, and several important documents. One of the documents immediately caught her attention. It was an identification with a photo of Mr. Alexander Turner, the owner of the mansion. Sarah felt the air escaping from her lungs. She had just found the personal wallet of the richest man in the city. As she held the wallet in her hands, a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions overwhelmed her. On one hand, her conscience told her that she should immediately return the wallet to its owner. It was the right thing to do, the honest thing. But on the other hand, a voice inside her whispered that this could be the opportunity she had been waiting for all her life. Sarah thought of Matthew, of the sleepless nights worrying about how she would pay for his next vaccine, of the small apartment she shared with her mother in a dangerous neighborhood. She thought of all the times she had dreamed of giving her son a better life, free from the hardships she herself had experienced. With the credit card she held in her hands, she could change the course of their lives forever. She could buy a house in a safe neighborhood, pay for the best education for Matthew, even stop working and devote herself entirely to raising her son. But at the same time, the weight of guilt began to settle in her chest. Sarah had always prided herself on her honesty. It was one of the values her mother had instilled in her since she was little. How could she look Matthew in the eye if she built their future on an act of dishonesty? As she struggled with this moral dilemma, Sarah heard voices approaching. Quickly, she put the wallet in the pocket of her uniform and returned to her tasks, pretending everything was normal. Mr. Turner and his wife, Sophia, appeared on the gravel path. Sarah observed them out of the corner of her eye while pretending to prune a bush. Alexander Turner, with his impeccable suit and distinguished bearing, walked confidently while talking on the phone. Beside him, Sophia, a beautiful and elegant woman, seemed distracted and a little sad. "I'm telling you, Sophia," Sarah heard Mr. Turner say as they passed near her, "that contract is going to make us even richer. We'll be able to buy that island you wanted so much." Sophia just nodded without much enthusiasm. Sarah knew, from rumors among the service staff, that the Turners had been trying to have children for years without success. All their wealth seemed unable to give them what they longed for most. When the couple disappeared into the mansion, Sarah took the wallet out of her pocket again. She held it in her hands, feeling the weight of the decision she had to make. On one side, the possibility of a better life for her and her son. On the other, her integrity and the values she wanted to pass on to Matthew. With her heart beating strongly, Sarah closed her eyes and made a decision. She knew that what she did next would change the course of her life forever. With determined steps, she headed towards the mansion, the wallet firmly grasped in her hand. Sarah's fate, and that of all those around her, was about to take an unexpected turn. What she didn't know was that her decision would trigger a series of events that would shake the foundations of the Turner mansion and forever change the lives of all its inhabitants. Sarah walked with firm steps towards the mansion, her heart beating strongly in her chest. Each step she took resonated in her ears like the ticking of a clock, marking the seconds that separated her from a decision that would change her life forever. As she entered the luxurious lobby, she came face to face with Sophia Turner, who was coming down the stairs with a distracted air. Upon seeing Sarah, Sophia stopped, noticing the expression of concern on the maid's face. "Is something wrong, Sarah?" asked Sophia, her tone mixing curiosity and concern. Sarah took a deep breath, gathering all her courage. "Mrs. Sophia, I need to speak with you and Mr. Alexander. It's important." Intrigued by the seriousness in Sarah's voice, Sophia nodded and led her to Alexander's office. Mr. Turner was sitting behind his imposing mahogany desk, talking on the phone. Seeing his wife and Sarah enter, he frowned and quickly ended the call. "What's going on?" he asked, his deep voice filling the room. Sarah took a step forward, her hands trembling slightly as she held the wallet. "Mr. Turner, I found this in the garden while I was working." Alexander's eyes widened as he recognized his wallet. He patted the pocket of his jacket, realizing that indeed it was missing. "My wallet, I hadn't even realized I had lost it." Sarah extended the wallet towards him, her voice trembling slightly. "Everything is inside, sir. The credit card, the money, the documents, everything." Alexander took the wallet, quickly checking its contents. His expression went from surprise to relief, and finally to a mixture of admiration and curiosity. He looked at Sarah intently, as if seeing her for the first time. "Sarah," he said slowly, "do you realize what you've just done?" Sarah nodded, lowering her gaze. "Yes, sir. I know it was the right thing to do, although—" She stopped, biting her lip. "Although what?" asked Sophia, approaching her. Sarah looked up, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Although for a moment I thought about not returning it." A tense silence fell over the room. Alexander and Sophia exchanged a look, surprised by Sarah's honesty. "Why did you think about keeping it?" asked Alexander, his voice softer than usual. Sarah took a breath, deciding that if she had been honest so far, she should be completely honest. "I have a small son, sir, Matthew. He's only 6 months old and sometimes it's hard, very hard. When I saw the credit card, for a moment I thought of all the things I could give him, how I could change our lives." Sophia approached Sarah, putting a hand on her shoulder. "But you decided to return it." Sarah nodded. "I couldn't live with myself if I didn't. It's not the example I want to set for my son." Alexander stood up from his chair, rounding the desk to stand in front of Sarah. "Your honesty is admirable, Sarah. Not many people would have done what you did." "Thank you, sirs," murmured Sarah, not knowing what else to say. Alexander looked at his wife, a silent conversation passing between them. Sophia nodded slightly, and Alexander turned his attention back to Sarah. "Sarah, your gesture has deeply impressed us. I think you deserve a reward for your honesty." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. A reward. She hadn't returned the wallet expecting anything in return, but she couldn't deny that any help would be welcome. "It's not necessary." "Sir," she began to say, but Alexander interrupted her with a gesture. "I insist, but it won't be money." He paused, as if carefully considering his next words. "Sarah, would you like a promotion?" Sarah blinked, surprised. "A promotion?" Alexander nodded. "Yes. We've been looking for someone for the position of head housekeeper, someone we can fully trust to oversee the running of the house. I think you would be perfect for the job." Sarah felt like she couldn't breathe. A promotion to head housekeeper would mean a considerable salary increase, better hours, more responsibilities. It was more than she had ever dared to dream. I don't know what to say," stammered Sarah. Sophia smiled, gently squeezing Sarah's shoulder. "Say yes, Sarah. You've earned it." With tears of joy in her eyes, Sarah nodded. "Yes, of course. Thank you." "Thank you so much." Alexander smiled, satisfied. "Excellent. You'll start tomorrow, and Sarah—" He paused, looking at her seriously. "Never forget that honesty and integrity are the most valuable qualities a person can have. Sarah nodded, overwhelmed by emotion and gratitude. As she left the office, she felt that a new chapter of her life was about to begin. What she didn't know was that this promotion would be just the beginning of a series of events that would change not only her life, but also that of the Turners in ways that none of them could have imagined. Meanwhile, in the library of the mansion, Ryan, the Turners' adopted son, listened to the conversation through the half-open door. His eyes gleamed with a mixture of curiosity and something darker. Sarah's arrival at a position of greater trust in the house could complicate his own secret plans. With an enigmatic smile, Ryan quietly moved away, his mind working on how he could use this new situation to his advantage. The sun had barely begun to peek over the horizon when Sarah crossed the doors of the Turner mansion. It was her first day as head housekeeper, and the mixture of excitement and nervousness made her heart beat strongly. She wore an elegant black suit, very different from the cleaning uniform she was used to, and her hair was tied back in an impeccable bun. As she entered the kitchen, she was met with the curious and surprised looks of her former co-workers. Carol, the cook, was the first to approach. "Sarah, is it true what they're saying? Are you the new head housekeeper?" she asked, with a mixture of amazement and joy in her voice. Sarah nodded, flashing a shy smile. "Yes, it's true. Mr. Turner offered me the position yesterday." A murmur of excitement ran through the kitchen. Most of the employees had known Sarah for years and appreciated her hard work and kindness. However, Sarah couldn't help but notice some looks of suspicion and envy among the more senior staff. "Well, congratulations, girl," said Carol, giving her a hug. "You deserve it. Now, how about I make you a coffee to celebrate?" Sarah gratefully accepted, aware that she would need all the energy possible to face her first day in the new position. While Carol prepared the coffee, Sarah began to mentally review her new responsibilities. Just as she was about to take her first sip of coffee, Sophia Turner entered the kitchen. All the employees immediately stood at attention, but Sophia calmed them with a kind gesture. "Good morning, everyone," greeted Sophia, before addressing Sarah directly. "Sarah, could you accompany me for a moment? There are some things I'd like to discuss with you about your new responsibilities." Sarah nodded, leaving her half-finished cup of coffee. "Of course, Mrs. Sophia." As she followed Sophia out of the kitchen, Sarah felt the eyes of her co-workers fixed on her back. She knew her sudden promotion would generate comments, but she was determined to prove that she deserved the trust the Turners had placed in her. Sophia led Sarah to a small study in the east wing of the mansion. The room was decorated with exquisite taste, with shelves full of books and a mahogany desk that dominated the space. "Please, sit down," said Sophia, indicating a chair in front of the desk. Sarah obeyed, feeling a little out of place in such an elegant environment. Sophia took a seat behind the desk and looked at Sarah with a mixture of kindness and seriousness. "Sarah, first of all, I want to congratulate you again on your promotion. Alexandra and I are convinced that you are the right person for this position." "Thank you, Mrs. Sophia," replied Sarah, her voice full of gratitude. "I'll do everything possible not to disappoint you." Sophia nodded. "I'm sure you will, but there's something else I want to discuss with you." She paused, as if looking for the right words. "As head housekeeper, you'll be much more involved in our family's daily life. You'll see and hear things that perhaps you didn't before." Sarah felt a knot in her stomach. Had she done something wrong? Were they already regretting their decision? As if reading her thoughts, Sophia quickly continued. "It's nothing bad, Sarah. It's just that... Well, I suppose you already know that Alexandra and I have been trying to have a child for years." Sarah nodded silently. The Turners' fertility problems were an open secret among the mansion staff. "Recently, we've decided to explore other options," continued Sophia, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "We're in the process of adoption." Sarah's eyes widened. "Oh, Mrs. Sophia, that's wonderful," she exclaimed, genuinely happy for the news. Sophia flashed a shy smile. "Thank you, Sarah. But for now, it's a delicate and private matter. We don't want the news to leak to the press until everything is finalized. Can I count on your discretion?" "Of course, ma'am," Sarah responded without hesitation. "You can trust me completely." Sophia visibly relaxed at Sarah's response. "Thank you. I knew we could count on you." Then, switching to a more professional tone, she added, "Now, about your new responsibilities." For the next hour, Sophia detailed the tasks that Sarah would have to supervise as head housekeeper. From coordinating the cleaning staff to managing the house supplies, the job seemed overwhelming, but Sarah was determined to face the challenge. When she finally left the study, Sarah felt dizzy from all the information, but also excited by the trust the Turners had placed in her. However, as she walked back to the kitchen, she couldn't help but feel a twinge of worry. Her new position meant more money and better conditions for her and Matthew, but it also meant delving deeper into the Turners' world, a world of secrets, wealth, and power that until now she had only observed from afar. Was she prepared for the complications this could bring to her life? As she pondered this, Sarah didn't realize that someone was watching her from the shadows of the hallway. Ryan, the Turners' adopted son, followed her with his gaze, an indecipherable expression on his face. For him, Sarah's arrival at a position of trust in the house was not just a curiosity, but a potential threat to his own secret plans. With a silent movement, Ryan slipped back to his room, his mind working frenetically on how he could use this new situation to his advantage. What Sarah didn't know was that her promotion had placed her at the center of a web of family intrigues and secrets that would soon threaten to unravel. The clock in the Turner mansion struck 11 at night, when Sarah finally finished her first day as head housekeeper. Exhausted but satisfied, she gathered her things and prepared to return home. As she walked down the long hallway towards the exit, a deep voice startled her. "Working late on your first day, huh?" Sarah turned to find herself face to face with Ryan Turner, Alexander and Sophia's adopted son. At 25, Ryan was known for his charisma and attractive appearance, but also for an air of mystery that always seemed to surround him. "Good evening, young Ryan," Sarah greeted, trying to maintain a professional tone despite her surprise. "Yes, there was a lot to organize." Ryan smiled, a gesture that didn't reach his eyes. "It must be a big change for you, going from cleaning the gardens to running the whole house." There was something in his tone that made Sarah feel uncomfortable. "It's a great responsibility," she responded cautiously. "But I'm grateful for the opportunity." Ryan took a step towards her, lowering his voice. "You know, Sarah, I've always wondered, how does a young and pretty woman like you end up working as a housekeeper?" Sarah felt her pulse quicken. She had never had such a personal conversation with Ryan before, and something in his attitude made her nervous. There was something in the way Ryan looked at her that made her feel like she was under a microscope. "There's nothing fascinating about it, young Ryan. I've just tried to do my job as best I can." Ryan let out a soft, almost mocking laugh. "Oh, Sarah, we both know there's more to this story, but don't worry. Your secret is safe with me. For now." Before Sarah could respond, Ryan turned and disappeared down the hallway, leaving her with a feeling of unease that she couldn't shake off. What secret was Ryan referring to? Sarah tried to convince herself that he was just playing with her, trying to make her nervous, but a part of her couldn't help but worry. Did Ryan know something about her past? Something she had fought so hard to leave behind? With her mind full of questions and her heart racing, Sarah left the mansion and headed to her small apartment. When she arrived, she found her mother, Dorothy, gently rocking Matthew in her arms. "How was your first day, my girl?" Dorothy asked quietly, so as not to wake the baby. Sarah forced a smile, not wanting to worry her mother. "Good, Mom. A lot to learn, but good." She took Matthew in her arms, feeling peace wash over her as she held her son. But even as she cradled him, she couldn't get Ryan's words out of her mind. That night, while everyone in the house slept, Sarah took out an old box from under her bed. Inside were photos, letters, and mementos of a life she had left behind, a life she had sworn never to mention again. With trembling hands, she pulled out a crumpled photo. In it, a younger Sarah smiled next to a handsome man. On the back of the photo, a simple inscription, Sarah and Jack, 2018. A solitary tear rolled down Sarah's cheek. Jack, Matthew's father. The man who had promised her the world and then abandoned her when she needed him most. The man whose true identity she had discovered too late. How could Ryan know anything about this? And what would happen if the Turners found out about her past? Sarah knew that if the truth came to light, she would not only lose her job, but could jeopardize the life she had built for herself and Matthew. As she put the photo back in the box, Sarah made a decision. A newspaper headline that made a cold smile appear on his face. Businessman Jack Reynolds implicated in money laundering scandal. Ryan closed the laptop, his mind working on how he could use this information. Sarah had just become a key piece in a game she didn't even know she was playing. The morning sun filtered through the curtains of Sophia Turner's room when the sound of her phone woke her up. With a sigh, she sat up in bed and looked at the screen. It was a message from the adoption agency. Meeting scheduled to discuss the case. Today, 2 p.m. Sophia felt her heart race. After years of failed attempts to have biological children, she and Alexander had decided to adopt. The process had been long and exhausting, but it finally seemed they were close to making their dream of being parents a reality. As she prepared for the day, Sophia couldn't help but think of Sarah and her son Matthew. There was something about the way Sarah cared for her baby that touched a sensitive chord in Sophia. She was the type of mother Sophia longed to be. In the kitchen, Sarah was already busy coordinating breakfast and the day's tasks. When she saw Sophia enter, she offered her a warm smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Sophia. Can I offer you something special for breakfast today?" Sophia shook her head. "Just coffee. Thank you, Sarah. I have an important meeting today and I'm a little nervous." Sarah nodded understandingly. "I'm sure everything will go well, ma'am. You always handle everything with such grace." Sophia felt a wave of gratitude towards Sarah. In the few days she had been head housekeeper, she had already become a pillar of support in the house. "Sarah," Sophia said suddenly, "can I ask you a personal question?" Sarah seemed surprised, but nodded. "Of course, ma'am." How is it to be a mother? I mean, how does it feel?" Sarah's eyes softened. "Oh, Mrs. Sophia, it's the hardest and most beautiful thing I've ever experienced. There are days when I'm exhausted and overwhelmed, but then Matthew smiles at me and everything makes sense. It's like a part of my heart is outside my body, walking around in the world." Sophia felt a lump form in her throat. "It sounds wonderful," she murmured. Sarah seemed to hesitate for a moment, but then added softly, "Mrs. Sophia, I know it's not my place to say this, but you'll be a wonderful mother. I see it in the way you care for everyone in this house, in your kindness and your strength. Any child would be lucky to have you as a mother." Sarah's words hit Sophia like a wave of emotion. Without thinking, she approached and hugged Sarah, surprising them both. "Thank you, Sarah," whispered Sophia, with tears in her eyes. "You don't know how much your words mean to me." Just at that moment, Ryan entered the kitchen, stopping short when he saw the scene. "Well, well," he said in a mocking tone. "How touching. The lady of the house and the maid, united in a maternal embrace." Sophia quickly separated from Sarah, wiping away her tears. "Ryan, please, this is not the time for your comments." Ryan raised his hands in a gesture of false innocence. "I'm just saying what I see, Mother. Although I wonder what Dad would think of this closeness with the staff." Sarah, feeling uncomfortable, mumbled an excuse and quickly left the kitchen, leaving Sophia and Ryan alone. Sophia looked at her adopted son with a mixture of frustration and weariness. "Ryan, why do you always have to be so difficult?" Ryan served himself a cup of coffee, feigning indifference. "I don't know what you mean, Mother. I just find it curious how our new head housekeeper has so quickly gained your trust, almost as if she had a special gift for it." Sophia frowned. "Sarah is an excellent employee and a wonderful person. I don't understand your animosity towards her." Ryan took a sip of his coffee, his eyes fixed on Sophia over the rim of the cup. "And have you considered that maybe she's too good to be true? That perhaps she has hidden motives?" "What are you talking about?" "Ryan!" Sophia's voice had a warning tone. Ryan shrugged. Nothing. I'm just saying you should be careful who you trust. Sometimes People are not what they seem. Before Sophia could respond, Alexander entered the kitchen, his face lighting up when he saw his wife. "Good morning, love. Ready for the big meeting today?" Sophia forced a smile, deciding to set aside the disturbing conversation with Ryan. "Yes, a little nervous, but ready." Alexander kissed her softly. "Everything will be fine, you'll see. Soon we'll have our little one at home." Ryan observed the scene with an indecipherable expression. "Well, it seems everyone has an exciting day ahead. If you'll excuse me, I have my own matters to attend to." As Ryan left the kitchen, Sophia couldn't help but feel a pang of worry. What was her adopted son plotting, and why did he seem so interested in discrediting Sarah? Meanwhile, in another part of the mansion, Sarah was trying to calm herself after the uncomfortable encounter in the kitchen. She was cleaning Alexander's study when her phone vibrated with a message. When she saw it, she felt the color drain from her face. "I know your secret. We need to talk. Back garden, midnight, hour." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the world crumbling around her. Ryan knew something, and now he had her cornered. What could she do? Should she tell the Turners everything before Ryan did? Or should she confront him and try to protect her secret? As she struggled with these questions, she didn't realize she had dropped a photo frame. The glass broke, revealing a hidden photo behind the familiar image of the Turner family. In it, a young Alexander smiled next to a man Sarah recognized with a shiver of horror. It was Jack, Matthew's father. Night fell over the Turner mansion like a black velvet cloak, bringing with it a deceptive stillness. In her small room in the service wing, Sarah paced back and forth, unable to sleep. The clock on the wall marked 11:30 p.m., and each tick seemed to amplify her anxiety. In less than 30 minutes, she would have to face Ryan in the back garden. Her mind was a whirlwind of questions and fears. What exactly did Ryan know? How had he discovered it? And most importantly, what did he intend to do with that information? Sarah approached the crib where Matthew slept peacefully, oblivious to his mother's worries. She gently caressed the baby's cheek, feeling a wave of love and protection. "I promise you everything will be all right, my love," she whispered, more to convince herself than her sleeping son. With a deep sigh, Sarah prepared to leave. She put on a dark jacket over her pajamas, and after making sure the baby monitor was on, she quietly left the room. His voice loaded with sarcasm. Sarah approached, keeping a prudent distance. "What do you want, Ryan? What do you think you know?" Ryan smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, Sarah, the question isn't what I think I know, but what I know for certain." He took out his phone and showed her an image. It was the same photo Sarah had accidentally seen in the study, Alexander and Jack, together, smiling. "You recognize this man, so don't you?" asked Ryan, pointing to Jack. "Your son's father, the man who mysteriously disappeared after being accused of money laundering, the same man who, curiously, seems to have had a close relationship with my father." Sarah felt like she couldn't breathe. How did you get that photo?" Ryan ignored her question. "What intrigues me, Sarah, is how a simple housekeeper ended up involved with a man like Jack Reynolds, and even more, how that same housekeeper ended up working in the house of Reynolds, former partner. Coincidence? I highly doubt it." Sarah took a step back, feeling the world spinning around her. "It's not what you think, Ryan. I didn't know. I didn't know who Jack really was until it was too late. And I never knew about his connection to your father until today." Ryan stared at her intently, as if trying to read the truth in her eyes. "Do you expect me to believe that all of this is just a big coincidence? That you're not here as part of some elaborate plan?" "It's the truth," exclaimed Sarah, tears threatening to spill from her eyes. "I came to work here because I needed the job, nothing more. I had no idea about the connection between Jack and your father. Please, Ryan, you have to believe me." For a moment, it seemed Ryan wavered, as if he wanted to believe her. But then, his expression hardened again. "Maybe I believe you, Sarah, but that doesn't change the fact that I now have this information. What do you think would happen if my parents found out?" Sarah felt her heart sink in her chest. "Please, Ryan, you can't tell them. I'll lose my job, my son." Ryan took a step towards her, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "Calm down, Sarah. I won't say anything. For now. But in return, I need you to do something for me." What do you want?" asked Sarah, fearing the answer. "Information," replied Ryan. "I want you to keep me informed about everything that happens in this house, especially about the adoption my parents are planning. Every detail, every conversation. I want it all." Sarah looked at him horrified. "But that would be betraying your parents' trust, Mrs. Sophia's." Ryan shrugged. "It's your choice, Sarah. Either you help me, or everyone finds out about your little secret. You decide." Before Sarah could respond, a noise from the house startled them both. Someone had turned on a light upstairs. "Think about it, Sarah," Ryan said quickly. "You have until tomorrow to give me your answer." With that, he disappeared into the darkness, leaving Sarah alone in the garden, trembling not only from the cold of the night, but from the weight of the impossible decision she had ahead of her. As she returned to her room, Matthew's cry greeted her. As she comforted him, Sarah couldn't help but let tears roll down her cheeks. How had she gotten into this situation, and how was she going to get out of it without losing everything? What Sarah didn't know was that someone else had witnessed her encounter with Ryan. From a window on the second floor, Sophia Turner had observed the entire scene. Her mind full of questions, and her heart torn between the trust she felt for Sarah and the doubt sown by the secret actions of the night. The next morning dawned grey and rainy, as if the sky reflected Sarah's inner turmoil. She had barely slept, her mind tormented by the impossible decision that lay ahead. As she prepared for another day of work, every movement seemed heavy, laden with the weight of her secret and Ryan's threat. In the kitchen, Sarah moved mechanically. There was a moment of awkward silence, as if Sophia wanted to say something more but didn't dare. Finally, Sophia spoke. "Sarah, you know you can trust me, right? If something's worrying you, anything, you can tell me." For a moment, Sarah felt the urge to confess everything, to tell Sophia about Jack, about Ryan's threat, about the fear that was consuming her, but the memory of Matthew, of what she could lose, stopped her. "Thank you, Mrs. Sophia," replied Sarah, feeling that each word was a betrayal. "I appreciate it very much." Just then, Ryan entered the kitchen, his presence bringing with it a palpable tension. "Good morning, Mother," he greeted with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Then, looking at Sarah, he added, "Good morning, Sarah. I hope you slept well." Sarah felt her blood run cold. Ryan's look was clear. He expected an answer to his ultimatum. "If you'll excuse me," mumbled Sarah, quickly leaving the kitchen. Once alone in the hallway, Sarah made a decision. She couldn't betray the Turners' trust, especially Sophia's, who had been so good to her, but she also couldn't risk losing everything she had fought for. There was a third option, one she hadn't considered until now, facing her past once and for all. With trembling hands, she took out her phone and dialed a number she hadn't used in years. After several rings, a familiar voice answered. "Hello?" Sarah took a deep breath. "Jack, it's me, Sarah. We need to talk." Meanwhile, in Alexander's study, a tense conversation was developing between father and son. "Ryan, what are you plotting?" asked Alexander, his voice loaded with suspicion. Ryan, sitting in front of his father's desk, maintained an expression of innocence. "I don't know what you mean, father." Alexander slammed his hand on the desk. Don't take me for a fool, Ryan. I've noticed how you look at Sarah, how you harass her with your comments. What is it that you know?" For a moment, Ryan's mask slipped, revealing a mixture of anger and resentment. "Why don't you tell me, father? Why don't you tell me about your relationship with Jack Reynolds?" Alexander visibly paled. How do you know about Jack?" Ryan stood up, his voice trembling with contained emotion. "Did you think I wouldn't eventually find out? That I wouldn't discover the secrets you've been hiding all these years? Ryan, you don't understand." "No, you don't understand," exploded Ryan. "All my life, I felt there was something, some secret you were hiding from me. And now, with Sarah's arrival and her son, everything seems to be connected somehow. Who is Sarah really to you, Father? And who am I in all of this? Alexander slumped in his chair, suddenly looking much older and tired. Ryan, my son, there are things from my past, from our family past, that are complicated, things I've tried to protect you from. I don't need your protection, interrupted Ryan. I need the truth, and if you don't give it to me, I'll find it on my own. With that, Ryan left the study, leaving Alexander immersed in his thoughts and memories. Meanwhile, in her small room, Sarah waited with her heart in her throat. She had agreed to meet Jack that very afternoon at a discreet cafe in the city centre. She knew this meeting could change everything, for better or worse. What Sarah didn't know was that her phone conversation hadn't gone unnoticed. Sophia, who had been looking for her to continue their morning conversation, had heard enough to confirm her suspicions. Something big was happening, something that involved Sarah, Ryan, and possibly her own husband. As the rain intensified outside the Turner mansion, each of its inhabitants prepared, in their own way, to face the storms that were approaching. Long-buried secrets were about to come to light, and the consequences threatened to destroy the very foundations of the Turner family and the new life that Sarah had fought so hard to build. The afternoon arrived with a stifling intensity, as if the very air was charged with the tension of secrets about to be revealed. Sarah, her heart pounding heavily in her chest, headed to the cafe where she had agreed to meet Jack. Each step she took seemed to bring her closer to a point of no return. The cafe was a discreet place, hidden on a side street in the city centre. Sarah entered, her eyes nervously scanning the place until she saw him. Jack was sitting at a table in the back, his figure so familiar and yet so strange after so much time. "Sarah," said Jack when he saw her, standing up. His voice was a mixture of surprise and something Sarah couldn't identify. Guilt, regret. "Jack," she replied, sitting across from him. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the weight of years and secrets between them too heavy to break easily. Finally, Sarah took a deep breath. "I need answers, Jack. About you, about Alexander Turner, about everything." Jack nodded slowly. "I suppose it was a matter of time. Where do you want me to start?" "From the beginning," said Sarah, her voice firm despite the trembling in her hands. "Who are you really? And what does Alexander Turner have to do with all this?" Jack closed his eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength for what he was about to say. "Alexander and I, we're brothers, Sarah, half-brothers to be exact." Sarah felt the world stop for a moment. "What? But how?" "Our father," continued Jack, "was a powerful and not very scrupulous man. He had two families, the official one, with Alexander's mother, and the secret one, with my mother. We grew up without knowing about each other, until our father died and the truth came to light." Sarah listened, stunned, as Jack unraveled a story of family secrets, shady businesses, and desperate decisions. "When we discovered the truth," Jack went on, "Alexander and I decided to keep the secret. He inherited most of the fortune and the legitimate businesses. Let's say I inherited the less legal aspects of our father's empire." "The money laundering," murmured Sarah, the pieces fitting in her mind. Jack nodded. "Alexander tried to help me get out of that world, but I was in too deep. And then I met you, Sarah. For the first time in my life, I wanted to change, to be better. But you disappeared," Sarah finished, the old wound reopening. "I had to," said Jack, his voice breaking. "The people I worked for found out I wanted to get out. They threatened to hurt you and our son. Disappearing was the only way to protect you." Sarah felt tears running down her cheeks. "And now? Why come back now?" "Because it's finally safe," Jack replied. "I've been working with the authorities, providing information. In exchange, they've offered me protection and the chance to start over. And I wanted to have the opportunity to explain everything to you, to meet my son." Silence fell between them, heavy with revelations and unspoken emotions. Sarah felt like her world had been turned upside down, and yet a part of her felt relieved to finally know the truth. "Sarah," Jack said softly, I know I have no right to ask you anything, but do you think you could ever forgive me?" Before Sarah could respond, the cafe door burst open. Ryan entered, his face a mask of fury and betrayal. "So here you are," he growled, looking at Jack with hatred. "The lost brother, the secret my father has been hiding all these years." Sarah stood up, alarmed. "Ryan, what are you doing here? How did I find you?" Ryan finished, his laugh bitter. "It wasn't difficult. You should be more careful with your phone calls, Sarah." Jack stood up, protectively placing himself in front of Sarah. "Ryan, I know this must be a shock for you, but—" "Shut up," Ryan shouted. "You have no right to speak to me. None of you do. You've been lying, hiding the truth. For what? To protect me or to protect yourselves?" The situation threatened to explode at any moment. Sarah looked desperately between Jack and Ryan, seeking a way to calm things down. It was then that she saw something that made her blood freeze. In Ryan's hand gleamed the metal of a gun. "Ryan," Sarah said softly, trying to keep calm, "please put down the gun. Let's talk about this." "Talk," Ryan spat. "I'm sick of lies and secrets. It's time for everyone to pay for what they've done." At that moment, the cafe door opened again. Alexander and Sophia Turner entered, their faces a mixture of fear and determination. "Ryan, son," said Alexander, his voice trembling, "please, don't do this. We can fix things." "Fix things," Ryan yelled, pointing the gun at his father. "How? With more lies, more secrets?" Time seemed to stop. Sarah saw everything as if in slow motion. Ryan aiming the gun, Alexander taking a step forward, Sophia screaming, and then, without thinking, Sarah lunged at Ryan. A shot was heard. Then, silence. The sound of the gunshot resonated in the small cafe, followed by a deafening silence that seemed to last an eternity. Sarah, who had thrown herself at Ryan in a desperate attempt to stop him, felt a sharp pain in her shoulder. She fell to the ground, aware that the bullet had hit her. "Sarah!" Several voices shouted in unison. Ryan, with eyes wide open, dropped the gun, horrified by what he had just done. Jack was the first to react, running towards Sarah and applying pressure to the wound. "Call an ambulance! Quick!" Jack shouted, while holding Sarah in his arms. Sophia, with trembling hands, took out her phone and dialed the emergency number. Alexander, meanwhile, approached Ryan, who was paralyzed in place. "Son, what have you done?" Alexander murmured, his voice broken by anguish and disbelief. Sarah, semi-conscious, watched the scene as if it were a dream. She saw Jack above her, his eyes full of concern and remorse. She saw Sophia talking frantically on the phone, and she saw Ryan, his face a mask of shock and horror. "Matthew," Sarah whispered, before darkness enveloped her. The following hours were a whirlwind of sirens, bright lights, and urgent voices. Sarah was rushed to the emergency room, while the police arrived at the cafe to investigate the incident. Ryan was detained, although he seemed to be in a state of shock, unable to fully comprehend what he had done. In the hospital waiting room, Alexander, Sophia, and Jack waited in tense silence, each lost in their own thoughts and remorse. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, a doctor approached them. "Family of Sarah Thompson?" the doctor asked. They all stood up instantly. I'm the father of her son," said Jack, stepping forward. The doctor nodded. "Mrs. Thompson is stable. The bullet didn't hit any vital organs, but she lost a lot of blood. She'll be under observation for the next 24 hours, but we expect a full recovery." A collective sigh of relief filled the room. "Can we see her?" asked Sophia, her voice trembling. "She can receive brief visits, one person at a time," the doctor replied, "but she needs to rest." Jack looked at Alexander and Sophia. "You should go first. I need to make a call." As Alexander and Sophia headed to Sarah's room, Jack went out into the hallway and dialed a number on his phone. "It's me," he said quietly. "There have been complications. I need you to move up the plan. Yes, right now." In the hospital room, Sarah slowly opened her eyes, finding Sophia's worried face. "Oh, Sarah," Sophia sobbed, taking her hand. "I'm so sorry. All of this." It's our fault. Sarah tried to speak, but her throat was dry. Alexander brought her a glass of water with a straw. After drinking a little, Sarah managed to whisper, "Matthew." "Where's Matthew?" "He's safe," Alexander assured her. "Your mother is taking care of him. Don't worry about anything now. Just focus on recovering." Sarah nodded weakly. "Ryan, what will happen to him?" Alexander and Sophia exchanged a pained look. "He's detained," Alexander finally said, "but we'll make sure he gets the help he needs. Sarah, what he did is unforgivable, but he's our son. And all of this is the result of years of secrets and lies. The fault is ours." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. "We all made mistakes," she murmured. "We all kept secrets." At that moment, Jack entered the room. Seeing Sarah awake, his eyes filled with tears. "Sarah," he said, approaching the bed, I'm so sorry. All of this is my fault." Sarah looked at him, a mixture of emotions crossing her face. "Jack, there's so much we need to talk about." Alexander cleared his throat. "I think we should leave them alone for a moment," he said, taking Sophia's hand and heading towards the door. Once alone, Jack sat next to Sarah's bed, carefully taking her hand. "Sarah, I know I have no right to ask you anything, but I need you to listen to me," Jack began. "Things are about to change drastically. The Witness Protection Program. They're going to relocate me. Soon." Sarah looked at him, surprised. But what will happen to Matthew?" Jack took a deep breath. "That depends on you. I can arrange for you to come with us. You and Matthew. We could have a fresh start, away from all of this." Sarah felt the world spinning around her. Jack's offer was tempting, a new life, away from the secrets and pain. But it also meant leaving behind everything she knew, including the Turners, who, despite everything, had become a kind of family to her. "I need time to think," Sarah finally said. Jack nodded. "I understand, but we don't have much time. I need an answer in the next 24 hours. Meanwhile, at the police station, Ryan was sitting in a cell, his mind a whirlwind of guilt, anger and confusion. Suddenly, an officer approached. "You have a visitor," said the policeman, opening the cell door. Ryan looked up, expecting to see his father or mother, but instead, he found himself face to face with a man he had never seen before. "Hello, Ryan," said the man. "My name is Eric Vega. I'm an old friend of your Uncle Jack, and I think we have a lot to talk about." Ryan's face hardened. "What do you want from me?" Eric smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I want to offer you the opportunity to get revenge on everyone who has lied to you, to take control of your life and your family's empire. Are you interested?" Ryan looked at the man, a spark of interest lighting up in his eyes. "I'm listening." As night fell over the city, the threads of fate began to intertwine in new and dangerous ways. Sarah, in her hospital bed, faced a decision that would change not only her life, but that of everyone around her. And in a cell at the police station, Ryan was preparing to make a pact that could destroy everything his family had built. The board was set, the pieces in place. The final game was about to begin. The morning arrived with a deceptive calm, like the stillness before a storm. In her hospital room, Sarah awoke feeling the weight of the decision she had to make. Jack's offer of a new life, away from all the pain and secrets, resonated in her mind. But she also thought about the Turners, about the life she had built, about the roots she had put down. Sophia entered the room, her face showing signs of a sleepless night. "Good morning, Sarah. How are you feeling?" "Better," Sarah replied, trying to smile. "Sophia, there's something I need to tell you." Sophia sat next to the bed, taking Sarah's hand. "What is it?" Sarah took a deep breath. "Jack has offered for us to go with him, Matthew and me, to start over in the Witness Protection Program." Sophia's face paled. "Oh, Sarah. And what have you decided?" "I still don't know," Sarah confessed, tears threatening to fall. "Part of me wants to go, to leave all this behind. But another part, Another part wants to stay, Sophia finished softly. Sarah nodded. You've become my family, Sophia, you, Alexander, even Ryan, despite everything. I don't know if I can simply leave it all behind. Sophia squeezed Sarah's hand. Sarah, listen to me. Whatever happens, whatever you decide, you'll always be part of our family. If you decide to leave, that we'll understand. And if you decide to stay, we'll support you in every way we can. Sophia's words touched Sarah deeply. In that moment, she felt she finally had the clarity she needed to make her decision. Meanwhile, at the police station, Ryan found himself at his own crossroads. Eric Vega's words resonated in his mind, tempting him with promises of power and revenge. Think about it. Ryan, Eric had said the night before, your father and your uncle have lied to you all your life. They've denied you your true inheritance. With my help, you could take what's rightfully yours. Ryan paced his cell, torn between loyalty to his family and the desire for revenge that burned inside him. He knew that accepting Eric's offer would mean crossing a line from which there was no return. But the idea of finally having control, of making everyone who had lied to him pay, was tempting. At that moment, Alexander arrived at the police station. When he entered the visiting room, Ryan could barely look him in the eye. Son, Alexander began, his voice loaded with emotion. I know I've made mistakes, that I've failed you in many ways, but I need you to know that everything I did thinking it was best for you. Ryan finally looked up, his eyes full of a mixture of anger and pain. What's best for me? Lying to me my whole life was best for me. Ryan, please, Alexander pleaded. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But don't make the mistake of seeking revenge. That will only bring more pain, more destruction. For a moment, Ryan seemed to waver, but then his expression hardened. It's too late, Father. I've already made my decision. Alexander felt the world crumbling around him. What do you mean, Ryan? What have you done? Before Ryan could respond, a police officer entered the room. Mr. Turner, you have an urgent call. It's your wife. Alexander hurried out, leaving Ryan alone with his thoughts and the decision he had just made. Back at the hospital, Jack entered Sarah's room, his face tense with anticipation. Sarah, I know I asked for 24 hours, but things have gotten complicated. I need to know your decision now. Sarah looked at Jack, then at Sophia, and finally closed her eyes, gathering all her strength. When she opened them again, there was a determination in them that hadn't been there before. Jack, she began, her voice firm despite the trembling in her hands, I appreciate your offer, and a part of me will always love you as Matthew's father, but my life is here now, my family is here. Jack seemed to deflate, a mixture of pain and understanding on his face. I understand, he said softly. I hope you're happy, Sarah, and that someday Matthew can understand and maybe forgive me. At that moment, Alexander burst into the room, his face pale with worry. We have a problem, he announced. Ryan has disappeared from the police station, and I just received a threatening call. Someone is after the company, after everything we've built. The silence that followed was deafening. Each of them realized they were on the edge of a precipice, and that the decisions they made in the next few hours would determine not only their own fates, but the future of the entire Turner family. Jack was the first to break the silence. I think I know who's behind this, he said, his voice laden with guilt. And it's my fault. My past has caught up with all of us. Sarah looked around at the people who had become her family and knew that, despite her decision to stay, nothing would ever be the same. The storm they had feared had finally arrived, and they were about to be swept away by it. What are we going to do? Asked Sophia, her voice barely a whisper. Alexander took his wife's hand, then looked at Sarah and Jack. The only thing we can do, Alexander continued, his voice filled with determination, is face this together, as a family. Jack stepped forward, his face a mask of guilt and resolution. Alexander is right, and I think I know where to start. The man behind all this, The one who has probably manipulated Ryan is named Eric Vega. He was my partner in the shady businesses I used to run. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine at hearing that name. Eric Vega, the same man you were running from when you disappeared. Jack nodded, shame evident in his eyes. The same. He's a dangerous man, without scruples. And now that I'm cooperating with the authorities, he wants revenge. Not just against me, but against the entire Turner family. Alexander clenched his fists, anger mixing with concern on his face. And you've brought that danger to our door, to your own son's door. Enough, Sophia intervened, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. Recriminations won't get us anywhere. We need a plan. Sarah, who had been listening in silence, finally spoke. She's right, and I think I know where we can start. Everyone turned to her, expectant. Ryan. We need to find Ryan before Vega can use him against us. Alexander nodded slowly. You're right, Sarah. But how? The police are already looking for him and haven't had any success. I might have an idea, said Sarah, hesitating for a moment before continuing. When I worked cleaning the mansion, I sometimes saw Ryan sneaking out at night. I think I know where he might be hiding. Jack looked at Sarah with a mixture of admiration and remorse. You're amazing. You know that, even after everything you've been through, you're still thinking about how to help others. Sarah gave him a small smile. That's what families do, isn't it? Alexander took control of the situation. All right, this is the plan. Jack, you and I will go look for Ryan. Sophia, stay here with Sarah. You'll be safer at the hospital. No, Sarah interrupted, trying to sit up in bed despite the pain. I'm going with you. I know the place better than anyone. But Sarah, your wound, Sophia began, worried. I'll be fine, Sarah insisted. Besides, maybe Ryan will listen to me. After all, I was the one who got shot. After a moment of doubt, everyone nodded in agreement. The plan was in motion. Meanwhile, in an old abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, Ryan paced nervously. Eric Vega watched him with a cold smile. You've done the right thing by joining me. Ryan Mao, said Vega, his voice soft but threatening. Together, we'll make your family pay for all their lies. Ryan stopped, looking at Vega with a mixture of fear and determination. And what happens after? What happens to me? Vega approached, putting a hand on Ryan's shoulder. After my young friend, you'll take control of the Turner Empire, as it always should have been. At that moment, Vega's phone rang. After a brief conversation, his face lit up with a malicious smile. It seems we'll have company soon, he announced. Your family is on their way. It's time to prepare our little welcome. Ryan felt panic invading him. What had he done? What had he gotten himself into? Back on the road, Alexander drove at full speed while Jack and Sarah held onto their seats. The silence in the car was tense, loaded with unexpressed fears and desperate hopes. Sarah, Jack said suddenly, breaking the silence, if something goes wrong, I want you to know that I'm sorry. For everything. Sarah looked at him, her eyes full of a mixture of emotions. I know, Jack, and I forgive you, but now let's focus on saving Ryan and stopping Vega. Alexander looked at them in the rearview mirror, a small smile of pride on his lips. Despite everything, his family was united, and that unity would be their greatest strength in the battle that was about to come. Finally, they arrived at the old warehouse. The building loomed before them, dark and threatening. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. It's here, she said, her voice barely a whisper. The three looked at each other, aware that what was about to happen would change their lives forever. With one last exchange of glances, they headed towards the entrance of the warehouse. What they didn't know was that, hidden in the shadows, several armed men were watching them. Waiting for Vega's signal to act, the trap was set, and they were about to fall into it. As they approached the door, Sarah felt something wasn't right. Wait, she whispered, stopping Alexander and Jack. I think... But before she could finish her sentence, the night lit up with the flash of several flashlights. They found themselves surrounded by armed men. Welcome, Eric Vega's voice resonated from the darkness. We've been expecting you. And so, with hearts beating frantically and fear tightening their throats, Sarah, Alexander, and Jack realized they had fallen right into Vega's trap. The real battle was about to begin, and the fate of the entire Turner family hung by a thread. The interior of the warehouse was a labyrinth of shadows and rusted metal. Sarah, Alexander, and Jack were escorted at gunpoint to an open area in the center, where Eric Vega awaited them with a triumphant smile. At his side, Ryan stood, his face a mask of conflict and remorse. "Ah, the family reunited at last," Vega mocked, his eyes gleaming with malice. "How touching." Alexander stepped forward, his voice tense but controlled. "Vega, whatever it is you want, let them go. This is between you and me." Vega let out a cold laugh. "Oh, Alexander, always trying to be the hero, but I'm afraid this goes far beyond you and me. This is about justice, about returning what was stolen." Sarah looked at Ryan, searching for any sign of the young man she knew. "Ryan," she said softly, "you don't have to do this. You can still choose the right path." Ryan's eyes met Sarah's, and for a moment, he seemed to waver. But Vega quickly intervened. "Don't listen to her, Ryan. Remember all the lies, all the secrets. They're not your real family. I'm the only one who's been honest with you." Jack, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. "That's not true, Eric. You've never been honest with anyone in your life. Ryan, I made mistakes, many mistakes, but everything I did to protect you, to protect everyone." The tension in the warehouse was palpable. Ryan looked from one side to the other, clearly struggling with an internal decision. Sarah took a step towards him, ignoring the guns pointed at her. "Ryan," she said, her voice full of compassion, "I know you're hurt, that you feel betrayed, but look around you. This isn't the solution. Real family isn't perfect, it makes mistakes, but in the end, it sticks together. It forgives." Sarah's words seemed to touch something deep inside Ryan. His eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, it looked like he was going to move towards her. Vega, sensing he was losing control of the situation, pulled out his own gun. "Enough talk. It's time to end this once and for all." Everything happened in a matter of seconds. Vega aimed his gun at Alexander, but before he could fire, Ryan lunged at him. In the ensuing struggle, a deafening shot was heard. Time seemed to stand still. When the echo of the shot faded, Ryan was on the ground, bleeding. Vega, taking advantage of the confusion, tried to escape, but Jack, in a burst of bravery, tackled him. Sarah ran to Ryan, pressing her hands over the wound. "Hang on, Ryan, please, hang on." Alexander, meanwhile, had managed to disarm one of Vega's men and was now pointing the gun at the others. "Drop your weapons, it's over." At that moment, sirens were heard in the distance. Sophia, worried about her family's safety, had called the police. The minutes that followed were a blur of activity. The police burst into the warehouse, arresting Vega and his men. Paramedics arrived shortly after, attending to Ryan and the other injured. Amidst the chaos, Sarah found herself holding Ryan's hand as they loaded him into the ambulance. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his eyes full of regret. "I'm so sorry." Sarah squeezed his hand. "I know. We forgive you, Ryan. We all forgive you." Days later, in the hospital room where Ryan was recovering, the Turner family was gathered. Alexander and Sophia on one side of the bed, Sarah and Jack on the other, and little Matthew in his mother's arms. "I think it's time we leave all the secrets behind," said Alexander, looking at each of those present. "It's time to be the family we always should have been." Sophia nodded, tears of joy in her eyes. "And that includes you, Sarah. You and Matthew, if you want, of course." Sarah looked at Jack, then at the Turners, and finally at her son. In that moment, she knew she had found her place. "Yes," she said, her voice full of emotion. "Yes, we want to be part of this family." Jack, though happy for Sarah and Matthew, knew his path was different. "I have to go," he said softly. "I have to answer for my mistakes, but I promise to be part of Matthew's life if you'll allow me." Ryan, from his hospital bed, extended his hand towards Jack. "Uncle," he said, the word sounding strange but right on his lips, "I hope that when you've paid your debt, you'll come back to us. We all deserve a second chance." And so, in that hospital room, surrounded by the people they loved, the Turner family began to heal. The secrets had been revealed, the lies undone, and although the road ahead wouldn't be easy, they knew they would face it together. Sarah looked around at the people who had become her family by choice. She had begun this journey as an employee with a secret, and now she was here, an integral part of this complicated but loving family. Her heart filled with gratitude and hope for the future. As the sun set outside the hospital window, bathing the room in a golden light, Sarah knew that, despite all the challenges and pain, she had found her home. And in the eyes of every person in that room, she could see the same feeling reflected: love, forgiveness, and the promise of a new beginning.